Today we have a panel of people who are going to be talking about drug and alcohol addiction. Everybody on this panel is an expert on addiction in one way or another. And as we go through introductions, first today, we're just going to ask them to give their names, but nothing else about them, because right now we don't want to put any labels on them, because we don't want anybody to have any preconceived notions about who they are and what they do and what they stand for. So I'm going to go ahead and start here with Dr. Westphal. Just, if you'll go ahead. I already gave your name.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing to say. Nothing to say.
Hi, I'm Shane.
First and last.
So that's Shane.
Dr. Gordon, just kidding. Shelby Gordon.
Bonnie Collins. Barbie.
Autumn.
Crystalline.
Okay, and then we're going to go right into the questions. This first question, I only want a one-word answer. And again, we're going to start with Dr. Westphal, then we're going to move this way. And then as we get more into the questions, we'll get more into the discussion piece. So the first thing is that research shows that people who become addicted to substances typically, but not always, start using before the age of 18. With age being a barrier, where do people typically get their alcohol or drugs for the first time? And if you have used addictive substances, where did you get it the first time?
One word answer? Family.
One word answer. Okay, family.
Friends dash family.
Okay.
Peers.
Family.
Parents.
Family.
Okay. So I'm hearing most of you got your first substance from family. Dr. Westphal, do you see that most of the time that people get?
Either from friends or family. You know, we always see that media push of stranger danger, but no, as with most things, it's the ones close to us.
Okay. Many people use alcohol and drugs without becoming addicted. What is the first step, or what was your first step in becoming addicted to alcohol or drugs? This time we're going to start in the middle with Barb. We're going to go to Autumn, then Crystal, then Bonnie, Shelby, and Dr. Westphal.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't think you were going to start with me. So I was going to
There were
wait.
so many names in there. Many people use drugs and alcohol without becoming addicted. What was the first step, or what was your first step in becoming addicted to alcohol or drugs?
I was allowed to drink at home at the age of 14 as long as I didn't go anywhere. But as soon as my dad went to bed, because he was drunk and passed out, I would leave and go with my friends. And that's how I started. And both of my parents, my mom and my biological mom and my dad were alcoholics, which came from their parents. So trickle down.
Okay, Autumn?
Escape. I was escaping from everything that was going on in my life.
Yeah, me too. That's,
Crystal?
yeah.
I would say the same thing. I was just really unhappy, and my parents were already addicts.
Bonnie?
I would say probably, significant stressors, in the family, and lack of supervision.
Okay, Shelby?
For me, there was accessibility through like my friends' parents. They drank and they allowed her to drink. So I would lie and say that I was going to sleep at her house, and I did, but we drank together. We chose to drink. So coupled with the fact that I was just a depressed kid and trying to look for that escape any way I could as well.
Yeah, I think two of the biggest correlates we see with addiction would be stress and then also some type of emptiness, whether it's just activities or whatever the case may be. So a need for fulfillment along with that stress.
Why do you think, Dr. Westphal, some people become addicted while other people do not?
Well, that has a lot of factors, and I guess I just kind of touched on a couple of those as well. But yeah, we see that a lack of other type of fulfilling activities is often related to addiction. Some personality factors for children, lack of supervision at times.
Okay, Barbara, want to bounce that same question over to you.
Repeat it. Because I'm like, what? How come you're doing that? You're making me all messed up here.
Why do some people become addicted to to substances while other people do not?
Actually, in college, I did a twin study. Both of the twins were adopted out. Parents were addicts and alcoholics using substances while they were pregnant. One lived with a family that did not drink. They were very normal, I should say. I don't know what that means, but normal as far as upbringing. And he never became an addict, even though genetically he was predisposed. The other twin, he became a really bad addict because he knew with his friends, and obviously he had something to look at or figure out within himself, he became an addict to escape. So a twin study was probably, that was my graduation when I had to do that. And I thought, how different is that you're raised in kind of a whatever normal is, family, and you don't ever use even though you're predisposed to use because genetically that's what happens. And the other one, you know, it's just genetically there, and if you start, it's there and you want it. And usually it's for escape to begin with students or kids.
Okay. I'm going to open that same question up to everybody else. Why do some people become addicted and other people do not?
So for me, it was both genetics and environment. Both my parents were addicts, so I grew up in a very addicted environment. And then so therefore the peers that I hung out with, they were all into deviant behaviors and using substances. My siblings who live with their dads and didn't live in the same environment as I did are not addicted.
Amazing, huh?
For all of those of you who have used or abused addictive substances and became addicted, what did you like about using those substances? And what did you use? And I'll just open that up.
I'll go first. I used anything I could get my hands on. My mom, if I opened the medicine cabinet, I could go up, down, in between, wherever I wanted to go, and it was right there. And it was a lot to do with escaping, and it was easily accessible. So it was like it wasn't taboo ever. It was normal, and that's just how it was. And
what did you like about taking that substance into your body?
well, I'll tell you the first thing is my mom, you know, baby aspirin. Do y'all know like what a little baby aspirin looks like? Well, when we had a fever, my mom would give me one of those. And so I think it was because the behaviors that were at 4 years old pushed on me in a negative influence that I had a whole bottle of them because I was in that much pain internally but did not know it. I just ate
So
them.
you liked how it affected your internal pain, and
Yep.
what did it do for you?
It relieved it, and I could go upstairs into my room and just be alone. I was only 4. So, and I didn't remember that until about 10 years ago. So that didn't even come up.
Anyone else, what did you like about?
So I was going to put a picture of my hand. Personally, I had a lot of trauma growing up, from like abuse situations to I grew up with a mom who has a pretty severe mental illness. She suffers from schizophrenia, and so a lot of my life growing up was filled with terror and fear because of the delusions that she was suffering from, and me not being old enough to understand that what she was saying wasn't real. So a lot of the time growing up, like, we thought people were trying to murder us, and we thought people were following us and trying to kill us. And so not understanding that and like escaping from that terror by using substances made escaping from that terror possible, and like all that fear and emotions, and also pretty bad self-esteem issues, and we moved around to different places a lot when I was growing up, so it was like easier to be accepted into these other like counterculture groups instead of like being popular. I was never popular wherever I went, you know, so it was just easier.
Just an escape then, okay? Anyone else, what did you, or why did you use?
I'm not going to share what I use because it's part of my tradition to not share that. But I will tell you why I used. I used in my life because I fit in. So, like I said, my family is already addicted. My whole family has been to prison, and I was the smart kid. I was the one that went to school every day, and I didn't fit in at home, so I started to use so that way I would fit in at home. And then it was an escape because, like Shelby, I had a lot of trauma in my life too. So I was using that to not only love myself, but also to escape from reality.
So it takes money, time, and enablers to support an addiction. What is one thing that you have done to get money, open up your time, or manipulate another person to support your addiction? And I'll give an example that someone gave me earlier, that they told their sibling that they needed gas money. And when they would get that gas money, then they, instead of using it for gas, would use it for something else.
I stole money
Still, okay?
in order to. Growing up, it was just like an escape, obviously. That's why any kid would take a whole bottle of baby aspirin just to get away from it all. And I was also in a traumatic home. But, Colleen, I forget questions all the time. This is what happens to me. Say that again.
So what is one thing you have done to get money?
Oh, I've stolen.
Open up your time,
Yeah.
or manipulate another person to support your addiction?
I would write out the monthly bills on checks, and I would put them underneath my dryer and tell my husband they were paid. So my stealing was basically from my husband, and because I didn't work, and we had 3 little kids at home, and I continued to do that for about 2 months until I got caught.
At what point, if you're someone who has an addiction, at what point did you realize that you had an addiction? Or was it one point? And I'll open that to anybody.
I'll go. When I don't think I had been using since, for a long time, and from preteen years. And when I started using heroin, I would use pills and I'd use heroin, and I honestly didn't think I had a problem until I started withdrawing from them and had to experience that physical withdrawal. All the way up until that point, I thought I just used because I wanted to, and I just wanted to every day. So I used every day. And when I started withdrawing, the first time I actually went to jail, I was like, oh, this might be an issue.
I think for me, I always knew that I had a problem because I was watching all these people around me go to prison and, this stuff happening. So it was normal in my household to have a problem, if that makes sense. And so I didn't realize it was something that I could not continue doing until my daughter was taken by DFS custody. And I went through treatment. And I realized that I had become the parent that I had for so long. And so that's when I changed.
Anyone else?
I was just told that if I continued, I wouldn't see him or her 3 kids ever again, that I would be done and that's it. So I had to go to treatment. I was forced into treatment, but never relapsed, which is great. But yeah, that was a very strict, it's like if you don't do something right now, we're gone and you're never gonna see us. And I did not want my kids to never be a part of my life. So that was what initiated me going.
Bonnie, I'm hoping you can help us with this question. What are some of the signs of addiction?
So the basic signs of someone that has an addiction would be tolerance and withdrawal. So tolerance would be that you have to continue to use the substance in higher amounts to get the same effect. And then withdrawal would be becoming physically ill or even having like psychiatric withdrawal symptoms from when you're no longer taking the substance. I mean, there's other things like what you're describing, with excessive amounts of time, that are spent either using your substance or coming down from your substance. You know, social aspects, you know, occupational, family, all those things are affected by your addiction. Trying to think what else off the top of my head.
Anyone want to jump in and help out there?
Just the tolerance part.
Yep.
Mhm.
Obsession and compulsion.
Yep.
Yep.
Obsessive behavior and the compulsion to use constantly.
One of the big problems that has come up in the state of Wyoming is opioid use. And I'm sure that all of you have heard of or seen something related to that. In 2017, Wyoming doctors wrote 68.5 opioid prescriptions for every 100 people. That is far above the national average. In your opinion, what responsibility, if any, do doctors have in enabling opioid drug addiction? And I'll open that up.
Well, was on so much medication, narcotics, fentanyl is one, OxyContin, oxycodone, Valium, antidepressants, and I would smoke pot. I didn't drink at all. And people say, well, didn't you wreck your sobriety? And I go, I didn't get addicted to this because I wanted to. I got addicted because the doctor kept giving it to me. And I had to really work hard through that. So when I moved here about 5 years ago, I was on everything. I hurt my back really bad and I couldn't even move. And I went to the emergency room here and the doctor said, well, what do you want? And I said, if I could have just, you know, a couple of Vicodin just to get rid of the pain. He's like, okay. So he wrote me a prescription for 30. I didn't need 30, didn't want 30. I just wanted to relax my back enough to get better. So I think that doctors really aren't aware at all about chemical dependency as far as narcotic use or opioids themselves. And I think that they need education.
What has anyone else on the panel seen as far as opioid use, abuse, and addiction in this area?
It's definitely increasing.
Oh, yeah.
Rock Springs was primarily, the drug of choice here was methamphetamine for many years, and alcohol, but opioids are definitely becoming more prominent around here. It definitely tends to start with prescription drug abuse, and then oftentimes it can lead to heroin.
In our society, going on a kind of a different direction, in our society, when people are arrested for drug-related crimes, their picture is posted online forever. This is a form of public shaming.
Yes.
Do you believe that public shaming is an effective deterrent for drug or alcohol abuse?
No, I don't.
I'm gonna say no because I feel like in my own experience, like changing my life was a struggle because of the fact that everyone knew who I was. Everyone knew my past, you know, and sometimes it's still hard to go back to where I used that and try to represent myself as a different person, as a person who is in recovery because of that stuff. And you know, and it makes it hard because in my head I would think like, what's the point of even getting clean? Because no one will ever trust me again, right?
Some of the punishments that people get for having felony convictions related to drug use some of the results are lifelong. So some people may lose their ability to vote or to enroll in certain colleges, things like that. Do any of you think that that is appropriate to punish someone for life once they've completed their sentence? Or do you think that the punishments are too harsh and too long-lasting?
I think it depends on the crime they committed while they were using, and I think that, again, there's not enough information for people who go to jail versus treatment. Or like my brother, he went to jail instead of treatment 4 different times. I don't have him anymore. He's gone. So our daughter also was gone due to not knowing what a chemical was, taking it, and it killed her. The person she was with murdered her. So you have to, there's just not enough information in the justice system. And with doctors, there's no information given to them. Maybe now there's more, but I think that there should be a workshop every 6 months for every doctor, everybody who deals with people in jail who are addicted, so that they know what's going on. And usually they don't have any medication in jail to help you withdrawal. You do it and you get very sick. So.
Well, and like, so in the criminal justice system, a lot of the law, like they're trying to change laws a little bit too late, but they're trying. And so I feel like if a person is able to finish their sentence, that's kind of a pretty good indicator that they are going to stay doing well, because the recidivism rate for prison, I just did a report on this, is like within 5 years, 77% of people go back to prison. That's according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So if somebody can stay clean after that 5-year period, it's a pretty good indicator they're going to continue to do well. And I think allowing them to get a better grasp on changing their life and allowing them to go to school or vote or participate in civil duties is like allowing them to be a person who is free of that mar on their record.
Yeah, I think I'll add, when we look at the history of drug laws in the United States, it always tends to kind of go in this cycle where there's this new scourge that gets all the publicity, and so then politicians kind of clutch their pearls and think, okay, something must be done. So they pass these draconian drug laws that are never applied equally to people, destroy a lot of lives, and really don't do anything to change drug rates. And so then eventually, after 30 years and a lot of ruined lives, those laws change, and there's a new, drug that all the media jumps on, and so then there's pearl clutching again and draconian laws and this cycle. But when you compare areas that have very strict drug laws to areas that don't, you see that those strict drug laws are just not very effective in reducing drug consumption.
What has been shown to be effective?
Well, I know.
The want. I think that there comes a point where either you die from it, or you're so desperate to want to get better that you would go into a facility to get help with it, with the withdrawal. And then, like you're saying, in 5 years, that's usually when somebody doesn't relapse. And like you said, it's a cycle. Everything's a cycle. And if you're in a non-drug environment, or your faith doesn't allow that, or whatever, if you've already broken that tie, then why not keep using? And it's difficult. I think and what you said is perfect. It just continues to go, and they hit one issue with drugs and alcohol, and then it becomes something else.
In an ideal world, if you got to choose what the public response would be to somebody who was, we'll say, caught with a substance, who has a substance abuse disorder, what would the public response be to that?
What do you mean public?
So what should the public do? Right now, what we do is we arrest people and we put them in jail.
Okay.
Sometimes we offer them drug court, sometimes we offer them the opportunity to go to rehab. That's not consistent. There's no way to know whether or not somebody's going to be offered rehabilitation or sent to jail. What would you prefer that the public's response, what would be the best response for the public if you lived in a perfect world and you knew that you got to choose?
Of course, every nation is different, but you can look at Portugal, where they've just decriminalized all drugs, and they refer people for rehabilitation, should they encounter legal problems. And in doing so, they've greatly reduced drug consumption, within the country, which is kind of a counter to the U.S. model of trying to crack down on something, which never works. So, yeah, Shane-utopia, we would have decriminalization and counseling.
Okay. And then moving down the road, do you believe that it should be decriminalized?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you can skip if you want, Bonnie.
I think it's kind of a complicated question, because I think with substance abuse often comes like really high crime rates. People that get arrested for, theft and assault and, these really, concerning severe crimes. And so I think it really does depend on the situation, and it just requires more assessment.
I don't think we should decriminalize it. I mean, if you look at it realistically, you should have a consequence for your behavior. If you've stolen, if you've hurt other people, if you're drunk driving and you kill a family, there has to be a consequence to that. And I think that if we decriminalize it all, then those families don't get any closure whatsoever. So I don't believe in making it legal to do, you know, whenever you want, or it's not a big deal, because people die. I mean, drunk drivers kill people, whole families, you know, and the resources aren't always knowledgeable by people, or even the justice system. You know, they don't get a choice or whatever, but if they don't charge them with anything, they get away literally with murder. So that's.
So I would say yes, decriminalize it. Like decriminalizing the substance itself and the, like if the person has a use disorder, I think that the other crimes go in a different category though.
Mhm.
I would say no. Sometimes getting arrested is the only thing that saves somebody's life when it comes right down to it, and removes them from the situation they're in when they can't remove themselves. And all addicts know they're committing crimes when they're committing crimes, and that there are consequences for those. So, no, it's hard to teach our kids not to do drugs when we've decriminalized it and made it legal, because society says it's okay.
Going off of that, I'll ask you this question first then, Crystalline. So many people believe that drug and alcohol addiction is just a personal choice, but then other people say it's something different. Do you believe drug and alcohol addiction is a moral failing, mental illness, physiological, medical issue, or something else altogether?
I believe addiction is a disease of the body, mind, and spirit.
Yep.
I would have to agree.
Yeah.
So all of them.
I don't think it's moral failing at all. I think that I think it is really complicated, and some people, I think it's I don't know. I don't 100% agree with any of them. I think it's more complicated than just saying this is what it is and this is what it isn't. I think it's really complicated and it's different for everybody.
There may be some people in this room who are abusing substances who are in the audience. If they turn to you for advice, what would you tell them? Open to anybody.
I would tell them to get to a 12-step meeting.
Yep.
Where would they find a 12-step meeting?
You
If
can
you don't know off the top of your head.
You can usually find hotlines, newspaper, Google it, na.org. There's all you got to do is just Google it, and you can usually find anything right where you're at.
I think one of the examples that I can give is that we drove up here to look at the new area that was built outside, and there was this, I guess he's probably 24 maybe, he was just standing on the sidewalk, and security's like, what are you doing here? And we pulled up, and my husband said, you know, why don't you go talk to that kid? And I'm like, why? And he said, because he was told there was a meeting here from 12 to 1, and there's not during the summer. And so I went over and I just said, you know, what are you looking for? You know, what do you need? What do you do for chemicals? And then only with another man in the car, because I would never do it on my own as a female with a male. It's not okay to do that. Brought him downtown. There's a meeting downtown, an AA meeting downtown. I don't know where the NA meetings are, but you could bring them there, you could suggest it, but if they don't have a vehicle, they can't get there. If they got dropped off here to go to a meeting and there's no meeting, then what? You know, you'd probably find the closest bar, I would guess.
I just want to say, like for the college, since we're in a college setting, I just wanted to bring up, like we have, like well-being and accessibility, we have counseling services here that are offered free to students, and so there's an option to go there, and we have a couple different options for 12-step meetings at this college right now. And so like, there's a lot of options. And so if you go to a counseling service, and there's like, I think a lot of people get freaked out about, oh, I have a problem, but everything's confidential. Like when you go and talk to somebody on campus about that stuff, everyone here, professors, instructors, administration, they're really understanding. And everyone I've encountered, I've encountered a lot of them. So I think it's knowing the resources and loving and accessibility. They have resources that they can then offer to students to get help with that type of stuff.
Anyone else? Okay. What is the first step to recovery?
Stop using. Stop
One.
using substances.
To stop. Okay.
Acknowledging
it.
you have a problem.
Yeah, you have to want it to do it.
Yeah, just agreeing with that. If there's not a desire to change one's life, then it's not going to occur. Even if, at least in my opinion, if someone were to quit using but still has a lot of those same underlying issues, they'll find some other way to manifest that. Perhaps switching from substance abuse to, I don't know, gambling addiction. And so I think for me, it's someone wanting to change their life and addressing those underlying issues.
All right. I'm going to first open up to the panel opportunity to introduce yourselves the way you would if you hadn't been stripped from all of your titles this morning or earlier today. And then I'm going to open up the questions to the audience to ask the panel members what you would like to ask them. So I'll start with you, Dr. Westphal.
Oh, hi, I'm Dr. Shane Westphal, professor of psychology here.
Contrary to my earlier self-labeling, I am not a doctor. I'm just a student here at Western. I've been in recovery for 5 years, and I'm recovering from addiction, and I graduate this semester.
My name is Bonnie Collins. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I work at Southwest Counseling Service, so I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist at Southwest. I've worked there for about 6 years. I do mostly substance abuse, crisis stabilization, residential treatment. I am.
My name is Barb, and I am an alcoholic and an addict. I used both alcohol and drugs. And I was a therapist for 22 years with adolescents when my kids were little. And then when my kids got into their teen years, I stopped and went with adults because I didn't want to go from kids to kids. And then again, turned it around and went back to adolescent mental health therapy along with chemical dependency, and I worked in school systems. That's how
I'm Autumn, and I'm an addict. I have a little bit of, like about 4 years of clean time.
I'm Crystal, and I'm an addict.
All right, so I'm going to open up the panel for discussion.
I was just going to say, I've been clean and sober for 34 years, as far as non-prescription given to me. So.
Hi, this question is directed to Dr. Shelby and Autumn.
Dr.
As you know, I know you girls personally, and you both have two beautiful girls yourself. My question is, in your experience of growing up in your life, you know, with your parents and stuff, how you grew up and stuff, how are you raising your children not to be like, I guess, like you were raised? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense.
I'm gonna throw that over to Autumn.
Oh my god. So I don't have an answer for that. All I know is that like I love my daughter more than I felt like I was loved. I communicate with my kiddo, and my daughter grows up in a 12-step meeting. So.
Yeah, I'm same. I just show her as much love and compassion as possible, and for me, I just want to be honest with her about everything when she asked questions, because I feel like when I was growing up I didn't get a lot of honesty from people. And so just being honest and open and playing that tape forward, we learned that in treatment, to play the tape forward, like if I ever have cravings or I'm ever having a hard time, like I personally just couldn't imagine not waking up to see her face every day. And so that's something that kind of gets me through.
So my name is Amy Galley, and I am a social work instructor here and director of wellbeing and accessibility. And I guess that this can be open to everybody, but I guess I'm specifically thinking Dr. Westphal and Bonnie. One thing that seems to be a common thread for those of you who identify as an addict is an adverse childhood experience. How much is that a consistent thing that we see in people who struggle with addiction? Or what, from your experience, how do you determine that?
I would say absolutely. I think, what you're describing, that ACEs scale and everything, and I wish I had that in front of me so I could actually say more about, all the different criteria. But those adverse childhood experiences can absolutely affect people, because what happens a lot from what I see is, children that have these experiences, they have a hard time coping with them, and so substances become an escape for that. So because anything that you use to try to manage yourself is a coping skill, but of course there's healthy coping skills versus unhealthy ones, and of course, substance abuse would be an unhealthy coping skill. So I think that's, it's a way to escape.
Yeah, I'll just extend on that. I think we both mentioned stress earlier as being correlated with early substance abuse, and of course, adverse incidents in childhood are going to cause early stress. So absolutely, you see that as a common theme. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that one is causing the other one to occur, but it does make it more likely. Sure.
Other questions?
I'll take a little bit of this because I'm an addict and an alcoholic, and my kids are 6, 4, and 7 months old when I got clean. And our oldest daughter is gone because of drugs and alcohol, even though every night I went to a meeting, so did their father and them. They went to an Alateen meeting or Alatot meeting or whatever they had available, and my husband went to Al-Anon. And yet, I have all 3 of our kids are addicts. And on his side of the family, nobody is. So I think that it's environmental and nature versus nurture and how you get there and what you do. And you look at it, it's like, I've been sober this long. How in the world, knowing what I did, do you guys want to use? I don't understand. And being a therapist, for goodness sakes, and your own children, at 12 years old, my son would come home and go into his room and go to sleep with cupcakes. And I would be like, are you high? And he's like, yeah, right, Mom. I'm gonna go get high, and you're an alcohol and drug therapist and mental health. And I'm like, I didn't see it. I thought he was, but when it's right in front of you, a lot of times you can't see it. And so, thankfully, it's only been one child. One's in treatment and one's in recovery. I think that's why I don't think that the freedom of making it legal to do any drug you want is okay ever. So,
Okay.
right?
Any questions?
Did I answer the question I just asked?
It's quiet in here.
I have one more. It said that, I don't know the statistics about this, but how many, this is for anybody to answer me. How many times does the panel think that, how do I put it? how would you, okay, people relapse all the time. How many times do you think that they have to relapse to finally get it through their head that they, you know, once, twice, 0?
So I think it's individual basis. Like I can tell you from my experience how many times I had to relapse, but I can't say it for anyone else. Everyone has to have that want to get clean.
And I never have.
And I think, again, it kind of refers to what I was mentioning earlier, where you have to address those underlying issues.
Right.
If, you know, what's causing those stresses, those underlying issues haven't changed, then relapse is likely. If those issues do change, someone's life has changed, so you see, it'd be likely to see less.
Since you work at Southwest Counseling, do you see clients repeat all the time, people that are going through the program time and time again?
Absolutely. I've definitely had clients that, you know, come in and they are able to complete the program and be successful. Or I've had clients who have come in multiple times and then they do eventually get it and they are successful. I've also seen clients who are removed from the program for certain reasons and then they are still able to go out there and maintain their recovery.
One more question I have. Do you think that there is a secret to staying sober and clean, or is it just willpower?
Well, what I will say about that is going off of that notion of, you know, addiction being a disease, it means that there needs to be constant maintenance and care. So the example I like to use a lot is, you know, people who are diagnosed with diabetes or cancer, you know, they still have to take their medications. They have to go see the doctor. You know, they have to maintain their illness. So just because a person that is diabetic is feeling better, do they stop taking their insulin? Probably don't. Same thing, you know, with someone that has, you know, a heart condition. When they're doing better, do they stop taking their medication? Probably not. So someone that has an addiction, if they're doing better, should they stop working their program of recovery? I would say that's a really bad idea, because at that point is when people become really overconfident, they become complacent, and that's a really scary place to be in, and can be a really severe risk for relapse.
Okay, I could have one more.
Go for it.
So this is directed at Adam and Kristen. Working a 12-step program or working a recovery program, how important do you think that is to keep clean?
That's the most important thing in my life today. My recovery comes before my family, before my husband, my child, all of those things. I have some clean time, and I'm not going to stop going to meetings or working steps or anything like that, because all of the things that I put in front of my recovery are going to be the first things I lose if I relapse.
Exactly, that's good.
Yeah, I would have to agree. My recovery, so I would have done anything, and I mean anything, to get loaded. And so that's how my recovery is. I will do anything to keep my recovery. And so, you know, my program of recovery is important. You know, like I don't do my other responsibilities of life before I do, you know, call my sponsor or work the steps or whatever. Like that comes first always.
So in other words, what you're saying is you use these in your daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like after seeing your families like going through that, why would like what made you guys want to do it too? Take drugs and stuff. Like, I'm not gonna rephrase it, but yeah.
My family is not addicts. I come from, most of my family is actually LDS, and pretty religious. But my mom's side, but it's kind of weird because like when I was in treatment, they had this book called Adult Child of an Alcoholic. And so it's like behaviors that you see in adult children of alcoholics. And I related with every one of those things, but my parent had a mental illness. And so I feel like there's a lot of overlap in that. But yeah, so I'm not qualified to answer that.
I would say that I just thought that that's what everybody did.
Yeah.
It was the culture of my home, and I thought that once I had chosen that road, that's where I made this choice. This is what I need to do. I didn't know I could turn around and go back and do something different. And I didn't see it as harmful at that time. I didn't see it as harmful until after I got into recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, so for me, I was the black sheep in an opposite way. Like, I was the good kid. I went to school. I had good grades. I was in sports. But you lacked that. I lacked that connection so my mom was never at my sports games. My mom was never there to look at my report card. You know, none of that stuff mattered in my house. So I used drugs so that way I could fit in with my family. And so it was normal. You know, I was the odd one out.
I think the normalcy that people make it, you know, but again, the twin study, it's like they're two people who came from two parents who are addicts, and then one loses everything and the other one lives fine. So, I don't know, I just think that people use in order to get rid of underlying issues most of the time. I would say 99% of the time. And I don't believe a lot about peer pressure, only because in the groups that I did with adolescents and young teens is that, or older teens, is that, you know, we would do a group with the parents on Tuesday. Thursday we would do it just with the students. And the parents, literally, I'll give you an example. One of the dads said, "What the hell do you know? Why are you telling my kid they can't use?" Whoa, wait a minute. They're here because they've gotten 2 underage drinking tickets, and they're here because they're court ordered because they're failing in school. That's, you know, I mean, your child didn't get here because I said, "Hey, I want that kid, I want that," you know, and parents can really be protective of their kids. But when you start coming to college, your parents aren't here anymore. And so you have to make a decision if you're going to be with a group of people who use or with the people who don't, or some do, some don't, and they're not addiction. They're not addicts. And it's easier to fit in with people when you're not using to find out who is using, so you don't have to have that situation come about. And parents are tough. I mean, they're really tough, you know, right? And it's hard, you know, it's just hard. And I think that parents can a lot of times parents say it's okay. You know, if you have a bonfire in the backyard and invite your friends over, "I don't want any drinking." Well, the parents go to sleep. The kids aren't stupid. You know, it's like they're crashed out, let's party, and that's what they do. So you have to really look at what you want in your life too, or not. Go ahead, Brett. I know that I kind of cut you off.
Oh, I was interested to know, you guys keep throwing out how this 12-step program is one of the most important things in recovery. Help the audience members understand what that means. What is the 12-step program?
Putting us on the spot, aren't you? For me, a 12-step program, for me, addiction is a disease of myself, and I am the problem. The drugs aren't the problem. I can set the drugs on the table and they're not going to hurt me all day unless I pick them up and use them. So I have to work on me. A 12-step program helps me to work on me. It helps me to find help in other addicts. It helps me to work on things I've done in the past, to work on character defects, to make amends to people when it's time. And it is a maintenance program. Mm-hmm. So it helps me to maintain my recovery, like was being talked about before, because I don't graduate from addiction or recovery. Like, I'm going to be an addict my entire life, and regardless of the amount of clean time I have to make sure I'm maintaining that. So we get someone in the program, we get a sponsor, we find out a little more about ourselves, and we dig deeper and get to the root of the problem, which is ourselves.
And so, like, I agree with all of that. And then, like, so for me, like, the 12-step fellowship is where I fit in. So I lacked that connection, that piece of that I fit in with people. And I didn't have family for a long time whenever I was, in my early recovery, and still to this day. So for me, that is people that love and care about me no matter what kind of stuff I have, and like somebody that I truly trust, which is another woman, which is something that I thought I would never say in my life.
Yeah.
And like and I can be appropriate with people. In my addiction, I didn't know how to be appropriate with people. I used people to, fill all of the emptiness inside of myself. And so my fellowship has taught me how to be appropriate with people, how to be appropriate in society, and all of those things.
There's a lot of value in people who are in recovery finding support through other people that are in recovery, and that's a big component of a 12-step meeting. Just being able to connect with people and to know that you're not alone.
Alex, do we have any questions from outreach?
No.
Bonnie, in the Southwest Counseling, does Southwest Counseling employ the 12-step program there?
So we don't have any sort of like 12-step models in our programs, but we highly recommend that people go out and seek self-helps. And so, and definitely 12-step meetings would be part of, doing some sort of self-help, like a component of that for your aftercare recovery. So we do more, when we're heavy on the group therapy at Southwest, and, we do a lot with just different evidence-based practices, with, corrective thinking and with, DBT skills and all of that. But definitely when people complete residential treatment, or when they're in some sort of outpatient, we definitely encourage them to do self-helps, and 12-step can be part of that.
Can any of you guys give a time, date, and location of a 12-step program in our community that you just know of off the top of your head?
So Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Wednesday, 8 o'clock, Friday, 7 o'clock, and Sunday, 7 o'clock, 513 G Street.
513
G Street.
G Street, okay. And is that NAAA or what is it?
It's Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay.
There's a meeting here. There's two meetings here, actually, at the college. There's an AA meeting at 5:30, I think, on Wednesdays and Fridays or Mondays? Mondays, Wednesdays and Mondays. And then there's actually a new group. It's called Recovery 101. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock here at the college in room 1348. And that is for every addiction. It's not like for alcohol or drugs, or it's for everything: sex, gambling, codependency. It's just for people to go, and it's more of a support group that can also employ the 12 steps. And so, there's a couple options right on campus for people to go to.
So we have quite a few students who report video game addictions. Can they go to that support group?
Anybody, any kind of addiction. It's not exclusive, like if you're just an addict or you're just an alcoholic, or it's for everybody, because the 12 steps can be applied in a way that, like, you substitute a few words and it can be applied to the addiction of that person's choice. Because, like, even NA, the 12 steps were adapted from the 12 steps of AA. It's all, that's the root of it. It all comes from AA, but they can be applied to where they fit for anybody's addiction that they're suffering with.
If they're looking for books, as far as the big book, the 12-step book, and NA or AA, where are those available? I don't know.
At the local, at the local groups, I'm sure, like, they could explain.
So if you're looking for any NA literature, we always have them on site at our meeting. And so you can always get them there. You can always go to the website, which is na.org, and get the literature from there as well. I know that for my meeting personally, like, we hand out the white booklet for Narcotics Anonymous, so you get that for free.
And for AA, usually your sponsor will get you your big book. And I guess that for me, I don't understand, because exactly what you said is everything that is, even food addiction, gambling, whatever it is, it all stemmed from two people, writing a book and trying to be in recovery and trying not to lose everything. And it was made out first to be faithful, as far as having a faith and depending on that. And a lot of times that didn't work. So Dr. Bob and Bill, they ended up doing it where they used each other as friends or co-sponsors to each other, and then they would go into a hospital room, somebody going through DTs and they're crazy, they don't know what's going on, and they would give them their message. So AA is kind of like the base, and then NA, Overeaters Anonymous, gambling, it all came from the big book of AA to begin with. The steps are the same. The way you talk about it is a little bit different.
Okay, so we have to get our students back to class for their 1 o'clock classes. So I want to thank you guys for being on the panel today, for being open to talk about your experiences and for your expertise. So if you'll give them a round of applause.